afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of MetLife Health Talk Show. This is Nancy Murad with you. And with me today, I have two experts in the mental and emotional well-being space. From Romania, joining us, Mr. Alexandru Manescu, who is the International Director of Clinical Services with CCS, or Corporate Counseling Services. And from the US, South Carolina in particular, Dr. Glenn Moriarty, who is the founder and CEO of Seven Cups, which is an online leading therapy platform that all of us can access and get support for emotional services. Today's episode is really about a very important topic in these times, which is mental well-being. What we're gonna try to do is shed light a little bit on some key concepts that are important around mental well-being, but most importantly, if you want, share some information about what kind of resources are out there available to us in these times, whether via people who have some access to mental well-being services with their employers, or just direct to consumer if you would like to get some support online, and we'll hear more about what Seven Cups do. So, Alexandru, I'm gonna start with you. I think so. You work with leading organizations and corporate spaces. Dealing a lot with emotional well-being therapy and employee space and so on. First of all, what is happening? What is happening with our mental health? Are we still okay globally? What is happening? What do you see on your side?
Well, hi, and thanks for the invitation. And actually, thank you for that question. I would say that we are living quite strange times from a mental health perspective, because as we're dealing with this new context, this unexpected and totally strange for all of us situation, obviously our coping mechanisms might not be as quick to follow. So that is why the situation, in my opinion, is as it is. We are seeing an increased need for psychoemotional support. We are seeing all across higher levels of anxieties, of worries. There are also many insecurities about how things are going to progress, about the economic state of things, about the coming months. So I think that mental health should, as I said, be in the front of the discussion, as people do need to be supported as they adjust to this new reality.
So, in these times, and I feel like it's true that, it's probably one of the most challenging on the emotional side kind of periods of our time, at least the ones we are living through right now. And there is a lot of, it has been an emerging topic, I would say, over the last 10 years in the sense of how we look at our emotional well-being in the most proactive way, whether from, physically exercising more, connecting more with nature, I would say being more, mindful. So practicing a lot of mindfulness things like meditation and gratitude, and, increasing our resilience to what life hits us with in general. So it feels like as though we're looking at it very much as a preventive approach. So really going into that preventive space. And this is really good. We also see a lot of, if you want, a lot of the employers we work with, so the organizations starting to look at mental services as preventive, so embedding them more and more into their benefits in general to employers. So that's really, I would say, a booming space, and it's extremely important. We kind of finally realize that mental health is health to start with, or emotional health. Now, the question becomes maybe to you, when do you recommend that we said about all the proactive things that we can do, but maybe at some point someone needs to seek more services? When do you recommend someone to speak to a specialist, to speak to a therapist, or to an external entity beyond themselves or a friend?
So that is actually a very good point, because there is a large discussion and whenever I'm talking to people, there's a lot of focus on mental health. And that phrasing for a lot of people is the opposite of mental illness. And I don't think that we should be discussing exclusively about mental illness. And that's why sometimes I like to use words as mental well-being or psychoemotional support, in the sense that I think what people should access and look at whenever they're going through something is any emotional need they might have, any problem that they might face in their daily life. It doesn't have to be a severe mental illness. It doesn't have to be a severe mental problem to find an answer in a type of counseling or in a counseling model. And I think that's a point that I've tried to send across as much as possible lately, and especially during this last weeks. We anyway live in a context that is quite stressful. So we don't need to wait until a particular problem reaches a certain peak in order to access support. Whenever we start seeing that something is not as it used to be, or we find that a particular life situation becomes more challenging to cope with, right? It doesn't have to be a severe situation. Someone should seek the support of a counselor and the support of a professional in order to deal with that.
Fantastic, absolutely. What should I expect if I seek such a discussion? So would it be like I assume it's just a discussion, right?
Well, I think that the first thing that people should expect is being listened to by a professional. And the power of being listened to by someone that that knows how to listen and who listens with let's say the professional expertise to listen, if I can call it like that, I think should not be taken lightly, because we've seen that a lot. Many people need to be heard and to share their story and their problem in a way that in a way that is satisfying for them, in a way that it helps them ventilate their emotions, right? So that would be the first thing that I think counseling should be perceived. Second of all, there would be someone that would understand the problem, would help you understand the problem, would help you find what seems to be troubling you, put a more of a concrete aspect to the problem, right? Whenever we're going through something, we do know that something is wrong, but we cannot really put our finger on it, and we cannot really say that this is what's troubling me exactly. And that might sometimes be the reason why we cannot find the solutions or an action plan for that, right? So talking to a counselor can shed light on that and can give more accurate context to what the problem seems to be. And then obviously, depending on the model, that counselor would help you to further find an action plan for yourself, help you develop a way forward, help you with some mechanisms, coping mechanisms, how to implement certain changes in your life. Obviously, that depends on the presenting problem, right? But within the EAP models, we go with solution-focused approaches and with short-term counseling. So that's the main drive in that from that perspective.
Beautiful. So since you mentioned EAP, let's also try to make that concept a bit more tangible. So a lot of people today have a lot of large organizations provide some sort of counseling support or employee assistance support to their people, to their employees, and often to the dependents of the employees. And I think really this is one of the best things that happened in the corporate space. I would say on the US side, this has been happening for years. In the Gulf region here, we see it now, a very emerging part. We have been championing these services within MetLife for some time now. We see a big adoption from the corporate place. So that's really beautiful. I think where we still find, and this is where this type of discussions really is important, we still kind of find a distance between the theory and the practice. So there is this gap. So the programs are there, but often maybe people for a reason or another, maybe lack of awareness or that familiarity with the service, the adoption kind of remains. I don't know if they're really fully utilized in that sense. So let's talk a little bit about what an EAP or Employee Assistance Program is in terms of counseling, and how can someone, what is the process today if I have this service and I would like to avail it in the next hour? What should I do?
Right. So obviously it depends from EAP model to EAP model, but in general, all EAPs would provide access to all employees and to all family members with a toll-free line, or at least a way of reaching out, right, telephonically. These lines would be staffed with clinical psychologists. And that's a reason for that, in the sense that a clinical psychologist would have the ability to, while talking to you, to go through different potential issues and try to pinpoint and focus on the one that is the most burning, or the one that is more pressing. So once you would access the line, you would engage directly in talking to such a counselor, and work with that counselor to share your story, to share your problem, receive support on the spot if that's the case, receive immediate assistance if that is the need, and anyway, access dedicated counselors for your particular problem. And I think that that's one of the bigger pluses for such programs, is that once professional would hear you out and would understand what your problem is, would then make a referral for you to receive counseling sessions within the EAP to someone that has expertise and has the ability to work with your particular presenting issue. So that is the model. Obviously, the number of sessions differs from company to company, and sometimes the EAP is just the gatekeeper towards sending and recommending the person to continue outside of the program, to find support, to direct them to other services that are available on the market. Because sometimes you can find, let's say, a full resolution of your problem within the limited number of sessions within a EAP, but sometimes not. But still, to be heard by someone initially, to share your story with someone professional, and then receive tailored recommendation for that, is still a highly valuable type of support.
Yeah, it's really about providing that, I would say, the funneling you in a certain way to the right channels. Maybe you would need to follow up later with even more advanced services, or it could be enough within this. Typically, it's a service that is provided for free for employees. It has a limited number of sessions, as you're saying, and sometimes these sessions may be enough, sometimes not. But I think it's really that that initial step, I would say, into the door. So would you? I would love, definitely, in the just if someone is listening and they're saying, "Oh, I don't have this with my employer," we will talk more with Dr. Glenn about what kind of direct to consumer there are services like 7 Cups that they can leverage online, irrespective if they have this with their employer. But back to a little bit on the EAP side. So tell me a little bit, what do you think, or what would you say to someone who would tell you, or if you want, is one session still enough, or 3 sessions are still enough? Should I take those even if I don't have more? Would you recommend me to take them? What is my benefit from those? Because we get that question a lot, and I think it's a very legitimate question.
Right. And that is a very valid question indeed. And we do see that question quite frequently asked. So that's a very good question. First of all, the immediacy of access to someone through an EAP, even though we have one, let's presume that it's a one session model. Even if we have just one session, the immediacy of talking to a professional um, is extremely important because there's a very short waiting time, right? So virtually almost immediate, that you can access someone when you really need it. Second of all, a session, although maybe not enough for more in-depth problems, is still, if done structured and if done in a way, in a format that is clearly um, aligned, right, with the expectations of someone. It can give some guidelines. It can help you understand the benefits of going further. It can give you some short tips and tools and instruments to cope with a particular situation. We have seen that, for instance, lately in this period with people having more of a higher anxiety level or having, let's say, some panic attacks, right? And even if that one session might not obviously alleviate the panic attacks entirely, but getting some breathing exercises, learning um, some cognitive rewiring tools, brief ones, right, to see things from a different perspective, and then receive recommendations for longer term services, either online or telephonic or so on, is still a highly valuable type of support. And we do see actually quite a high level of satisfaction of people lately calling for such type of issues that don't really require or don't want to have necessarily already a scheduled second session, because that one session was for them satisfactory, right? And then they receive a list of referrals of what they can do after that. So that for them was quite a successful EAP intervention. So we do see that quite a lot.
Awesome. Yeah. I think it really goes back to your point earlier about seeking just a discussion sometimes as early as possible and as proactively and as naturally, I would say. It doesn't have to be a treatment course, or it might of course end up into something more long term depending on the need of the case.
Right.
Sometimes it in itself it could help alleviate a lot of uncertainties or lack of clarity in someone's mindset. So this is certainly something. Thanks for clarifying this. Let's jump little bit back to the US and talk to Glenn about Seven Cups. So, Dr. Glenn, tell us a little bit more about Seven Cups for anyone who doesn't know what this online platform is, and why did you start it in the first place?
Okay, yeah. So thank you again for the invitation. It's great to be here with you and Alex. So Seven Cups is a free emotional support service. It has really four main components. So the first part is active listening. So connecting with a trained volunteer listener. We have 411,000 trained volunteer listeners in 189 countries that provide support in 140 languages. For folks that would like extra help, they can talk to a licensed professional on the platform as well. And that's how we fund the whole operation. So 99.8% of what we do is at no cost, but 0.2% of people upgrade to talk to a licensed person. And then we charge for that service. So the first part, that's the first part, emotional support. The second part is growth paths, or what clinicians would know as treatment plans. So bite-sized exercises that are research-backed to help people overcome specific challenges. So like if you're struggling with panic attacks, here are some breathing exercises you can do to overcome panic attacks. If you're struggling with depression, here's some cognitive behavioral exercises to help you with depression. That's the second piece. And then the third and last piece is community. So we're a global community of people all around the world. And then we also have sub-communities, so groups of people that are focused on many of the kind of life issues that Alex was addressing, but also specific mental health challenges as well, like depression or anxiety or substance use. So that's kind of high level what Seven Cups is. To make it a little bit more personal, and this also highlights Alex's point as well, just the power of listening. So whenever you're going through a hard time, one of the first things you want to do, if something was to happen to you all, I know it's the end of the day where you are, you're actually already home because of the quarantine, but if you were to get say a phone call or something for some kind of challenge at work or otherwise, you would want to call somebody and talk to them about it. And just that simple process of sharing what's on your mind with another person, it's a universal human impulse. Doesn't matter what language you speak, doesn't matter what country you're from, doesn't matter how much financial resources you have. When we are in some level of distress and we can simply tell another person about it, it helps us feel so much better. And so that was really why I started Seven Cups. It occurred to me that there was a whole bunch of behavior that's offline that hadn't yet moved online. So I have another technology company. It was learning. When I was a kid, learning was entirely offline. Not so much for you folks, but for me, there was not really an online option. And now it's mostly online. Dating was entirely offline. Then of course it's moved online. And so the need to talk to somebody was the offline behavior that hadn't yet moved online. And that's when I thought, you know what, we should really do this. We should make something so that anybody, anywhere, regardless of who they are, can connect with a caring person to listen to them.
Awesome. So today, if we go, I think you explained it already in terms of what kind of features there are on the platform today. So maybe to like explain further. So there is a feature that people can act. There are a lot of features that are free, as you're saying, and then there are features that someone can access with a paid service. So I would like to touch with you a little bit on the listeners, because I thought your story around this was very interesting, and we had that discussion before. Why would I want to speak to a listener who may not, who's maybe a trained volunteer, not a therapist? So the paid service, you speak to a specialized therapist or a qualified therapist, I would say. With the non-paid service, you speak with a trained and validated listener from your platform. That you guys have some measures to, we're going to speak about them, to kind of like ensure they are crossing a certain threshold of training. And the question becomes, when should I seek a listener versus a therapist? And what kind of affinity would I expect to speak to someone that I don't know online, right? Like, people might be asking, match, I think here is very important. And one of the things that I always hear people complain about, and maybe also often a reason to check people out in that very early in that process, is match. So it's exactly like dating. It's exactly like finding a house. It's also about finding the right person you want to talk to, right?
Yeah.
So it's a personal affinity, and with these things, it's an extremely, I would say, there are sometimes religious backgrounds that don't match, or cultural backgrounds. So how do you what kind of affinity should I expect when I go on the platform, and how does this happen?
So very good question. So really what you're saying is, hey, when is it best to talk with a listener, and when is it best to talk to a licensed professional? And I think from our perspective, what we like to do is look at the broader demand for mental health services, not just in the U.S., but really all around the globe. So part of the challenge is there's increased demand for depression, anxiety, substance use services. People are struggling. And I'm a psychologist. My wife's a therapist. We have over 100 licensed professionals on the platform. Alex is a psychologist. I'm super thankful for clinicians. The challenge is the demand is so high, and there's just not enough clinicians. So we're not able to help as many people as we want. So in the US, half of the people that need help can't get it. And then so what we try to do is we try to empower regular people, like your neighbor, colleague you work with, teacher, coach, and we try to train them. And then we connect them with clinicians plus technology. And so the consequence of that is you have many, many more people helped. The challenge, I think there's a good way of looking at this, is a little bit like a triangle. So ideally, folks that have like relational problems or minor stressors should talk to a trained volunteer or a friend, somebody that they can trust who will listen to them and help them get perspective and sort through it. The specialists, the people, you know, that have these kind of advanced training, in my judgment, I think should be connecting with people that need more specific help or more advanced help. And so part of the challenge, I think, is we've got a little bit of a triage issue where folks with less need or less challenges are talking to people with really advanced training. And so if we could help people with kind of mild subclinical issues talk to regular folks and then refer up people to other kind of clinicians, I think we would see many more people helped. The other kind of question that you have to consider when people are seeking help is the role of finances. So on our platform, we do have licensed professionals that provide online therapy, but they're $150 a month for unlimited messaging therapy. So a person can chat with a therapist. It's all text-based. The therapist will respond up to 2 times a day, but not on the weekends. So this is a great solution for people that can afford $150 a month. For people that don't have financial resources, if we want to get them help, then we need to find a different way to get them support. So one option is for them to connect with a trained volunteer listener. And so to your point of affinity, how do I feel like I really can connect with somebody? Sometimes choices are too complicated. So somebody can come to the site and make what we call as a general request, which is just chat with kind of any person. And what will happen is their request will come out. And at any given time, we have, you know, thousands of listeners on the platform providing care and support. So right now we've got 400 people on the desktop and probably another couple hundred on the app. So say 600 people either giving or receiving support. And our wait times are not that long, under a few minutes to connect with a listener to get care. But still, that general request is, hey, I don't want to make a complicated choice about who I want to chat with. However, if you do want to make that choice or go through a sorting process, you can search for listeners by keywords. You can search for age. You can search for country. We have folks in 189 countries. You can search by gender. You can look at listeners by different metrics. You can look for listeners and therapists. You can search by topic area. So as an example, if I'm, you know, somebody struggling with loneliness, I can find listeners that have more experience in loneliness. Or of course, language. We also have the ability to connect you with somebody.
Do we have listeners anywhere in the Gulf region?
Yes. Yep. So the what you would do is you could search any country you want, and then or you can search any language you want as an example, and listeners will show up. We have 411,000 listeners, so most any country you're looking at, you'd be able to find people pretty readily, or in the language you speak as well. So that's also
by themselves, right? So it's kind of a mutual privacy thing, or how does it work?
Yes, it's a private chat. So the listeners, so when you're a user and you come to Seven Cups, we auto assign you a username. And part of the reason we do that is because if you try to choose a username and it's already taken, that can be a frustrating experience for you, especially if you're in some level of distress. So you can change your username, but we auto assign you one, so you're not identified. And then listeners create their own usernames as well. So like this person is Dancing Waves as an example. This person is Anomalia. And you can learn more about the listeners too. Like, so to your point, you can see where they're from. You can read their bio. You can see what categories they focus on, how many people they've helped, what languages they speak. You can also read their qualitative reviews as well. So this is what other people have said about them. And then you can see all kinds of different badges that they've kind of earned along the way in their continuing education program. But yes, for the most part, listeners are also anonymous. I'm on the platform. I'm Glenn M. So, that's kind of less anonymous, but by and large, people choose their own usernames.
Awesome. So, Glenn, how did you? This is a very interesting thing, and I think it also they always say the best way to heal yourself is to help others, right? So, how did you manage to get on board all these people who are trying to help others and listen to them for absolutely, I would assume, no cost there?
Yeah, great question. So it wasn't easy. I went through, as you know, we talked about this. I went through Y Combinator, which is a startup accelerator in California, and the focus is on growth. So you just want to grow 5 to 7% over a week. And I was the first listener. I was listening like 18 hours a day. My wife was the second. We were getting students from California universities, and it just wasn't working. There was like way too much demand for the platform. Um, and so finally
How many people have you helped today? Speaking of that.
so we've reached over 40 million people. And it's probably closer to 50 million now. I haven't, the stats on our site say 39 million, but it's increased pretty dramatically since that time. But and we've done billions in messages. So we also have a lot of data to better help people as well, in terms of what makes a great listener. But anyways, what happened was we could never get in front of the demand. And this old English gentleman, Robin Steptoe, who I will remember forever, was a peer support at NAMI, which is a nonprofit in the U.S. And he said, Glenn, why don't you put a little sign over the chat that just was like a big blue rotation banner that said, one of the best ways to help yourself is to help somebody else. And, you know, as a psychologist, this was 2013. This was a little bit of a radical idea. It's not so radical now, but back then it sadly was. And then we did it. And then it's not that we've ever gotten completely in front of demand, but that helped us get a lot of the way there. And then what's intriguing about that is we've so many sites linked to us all around the globe. So we have users from all over the world that come to 7 Cups. And so 3% of the people that get help on the platform then sign up to give back. So we have this kind of international workforce of volunteers that we didn't deliberately try to build. It just was a happy accident. It just kind of organically developed as a consequence of people seeking help on the platform.
Amazing. Do you see increasing demand over the years? Have you seen that trend?
Yes. Yeah, we've grown even in so since COVID hit, we're up 76% in daily messages. So we used to do right around 500,000 messages a day. Now we're doing over 850,000 messages a day. So it's big demand. People are in a tough spot right now.
Wow. Alex, I see you nodding. I assume you're seeing the same trend, increasing demand.
Yes, I was actually thinking that somewhere in the figure of what Glenn was sharing is something that we're experiencing ourselves. It's kind of the same proportion of increasing demand. So it's wonderful to see that that there's confirmation to what we're seeing. Obviously, it's not wonderful that it's happening, but basically our own take on the situation seems to be confirmed this way also. So there's clear demand for such type of support.
Mm-hmm. To your point, I really think so. We always also have that discussion internally with the team and the corporate HRs and so on. So is adoption a good thing or a bad thing? Does it mean that my people are more not at ease and they want more mental support, or is it that we're minimizing stigma and people feel more comfortable talking to someone? And I really can't answer that. I think sometimes it's both, so there are confounding factors there, but we certainly see that there is an increasing I would say, I'm sure in these times that there are people who are more stressed, but also there is an increasing attention to that topic that is raising the awareness. Glenn, any thoughts that we didn't address that you would like to add?
I think broadly, just I think we're at an exciting point right now. The maybe the silver lining in the COVID process is that it's elevated, as you've both indicated, it's elevated the need here. And I think if we can begin to empower one another and look at this as an opportunity to strengthen our social fabric, then if there is a phase two, right, or if there is some other crisis, there will always be crises, but we can begin to deliberately steer into this and think, okay, let's strengthen our capabilities and our resources so that we're not so much victims when these things come through, like they are stressors, they do tax us, but we kind of navigate through them and we get stronger through it. So it's like we've learned some lessons, we've integrated some things, we're still hurting, we're grieving, but then we're moving forward to the next thing that comes, and we're constantly operating on how we can get smarter and stronger. So I think there's an opportunity there for that.
Amazing conclusion. Thanks for that. I really think that it's all about preparedness, to your point, right? So having what kind of, uh, whether on the mental side or in general emergency preparedness, this proactivity in us having those resources and moving forward with them stronger in the next time as they emerge. And this is the, if you want, the importance of, well, there are unfortunate events, unfortunately, that happened. There was a lot of lives lost in the process. But if we also look a little bit at the positive side, there were a lot of disruptions that I think helped us, and maybe they will help us for a long time for the next decade. Alex, any closing points from your side?
I would really like indeed to highlight Glenn's point. I think that online counseling has obviously been around for a long time, but it has really shown its strength and its force within this last couple of weeks. So I'm sure that's going to linger and that's going to remain. Also, this openness of people to start accessing them. So I do think from a mental well-being perspective, we're moving to a different era, if you want. Call me optimistic, but I really think that it's going to push us further towards building more trust towards this type of services. And I would like to end on the note that I've started, is that you don't need to wait, or you shouldn't wait until a situation becomes so severe that it requires a lot of or requires in-depth support. And I would welcome anybody that feels that there's something in their life that is not as it should be, or that it's not, they find it more difficult lately to cope with, to do access any of the models that are available out there of support.
Great shout out. Thank you so much. Really great time, both of you, and thank you for your time and this discussion. With that, wishing hopefully everyone with the, the times forward, a bit more of peace of mind. But in case not, please don't hesitate anytime to reach out, whether to a friend or to any, specialist or service. These are always there to support you and help you. Uh, at the end of the day, life is fragile and we have to go through it happy. We owe it to ourselves if you want to go through it happy. Thanks, guys.